Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 5, Globalization and Social Movements. And our topic is Globalization and Social Movements in India. First one is farmers. Globalization is likely to have serious implications for India's agriculture. India signed the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade (GATT) at Marrakesh in 1994 and became part of the World Trade Organization (WTO). As part of the GATT agreement, developing countries, including India, are under obligation to introduce reduction in subsidies and keep it to the 10% of farmers' value output. But cutting down on subsidies does not seem to be practical because of strong resistance of the farmers' lobby. India, together with other countries of the third world, has accused the WTO of following discriminatory practices because the developed countries continue to give subsidies while they continue to pressurize the developing countries to cut subsidies. Another gate related problem affecting the interest of farmers is introduction of patenting in agriculture. A farmer is not automatically permitted to use seeds of the protected varieties which he saved for sowing next crop. He has either to pay compensation for the use of the seeds saved by him or to obtain permission of the breeders. As most of the plant breeders are multinational corporations and their main motive is profit, the only option left with the farmers is to buy the seeds again. Farmers in Karnataka has registered their protest against this arrangement by attacking the farm of a Cargill Seeds, a multinational seeds company. The farmers have been joined by the NGOs in their protest against the seed companies. Liberalizing agricultural sector seems to be more contentious. A jump in the food prices appear to be an inevitable outcome of liberalization. This fear has a solid basis. The international prices of food grains are higher than domestic prices. Any rise in food prices would hit the poor hardly. This would make the government of the day immensely unpopular and make seriously jeopardize the electoral fortunes of the ruling party. Overall, the response of the rich farmers' movement towards the new economic policy and India joining the WTO has not been undifferentiated. Sharad Joshi, an important leader of farmers in the west part of the country, has welcomed the new development. He expects opportunities for farmers in the face of liberalization. At the same time, Mahendra Singh Tikat in the north and the Nanjudas Swami in the south are apprehensive of negative fallouts of the liberalization in the agriculture sector. Economic reforms in agriculture sector have not met any serious protest because a section of rich farmers is finding new investment opportunities in agro-based industries like sugar, rice mills, food processing, floriculture, and horticulture. In the 1990s, India has increased its exports of both fresh and processed fruits and vegetables. As China has joined the WTO and is deepening its engagement with globalization, the biggest risk for India may be being left behind. It would mean losing out on opportunities offered by globalization. Some people argue that the farmers' movement should not oppose globalization, while it is always good to be watchful against negative fallouts of globalization at the same time. Indian farmers should ensure that they benefit from the opportunities offered by globalization. The next topic is working classes. Globalization has thrown big challenges before the working class movement. An important part of the globalization agenda has been privatization of public sector units in India, which has meant disinvestments from and privatization of the public sector enterprises. Among the main planks of the new economic policy are closure of sick and loose making public enterprises. Workers have faced the prospect of retrenchment. There have been cases of voluntary retirement schemes, VRS, casualization and contractualization of workers have been other accompaniments of globalization. The practice of keeping contract and casual labor in place of regular employees has become widespread. Many people have argued that the post economic reform period has been a period of jobless growth. As part of the subalternization and structural adjustment program, number of vacancies have come down. There has been a marked decline in the growth rate of total employment in the organized sector in the 1990s as compared to 1980s. As part of the new economic policy, the policy of downsizing has started. This means reducing overheads for cost reduction. Industrial Disputes Act 1947 lays reasonable restrictions on employers intending to undertake retrenchment or closure. This act stipulates that in case of retrenchment or closure, due notice will have to be given to the union. In such situation, the union and management has to devise ways and means to protect employment of the workers. It is obvious that the labor laws regarding job security are being changed on the ground of economic rationality. Downsizing in developed countries is less painful because of the fully developed social security system already in place. This unfortunately is not the case in developing countries like India. However, a national renewal fund was created to provide social safety net to the labor force rendered jobless as early as in 1992. Liberalization has also meant relaxation in government control over the private sector, as a result of which the bargaining power of labor capital has come down. There have been strikes by trade unions to protect the interest of workers in state electricity boards, ITDC hotels, nationalized banks, etc. The introduction of the new economic policy has exposed the weaknesses of the working class movement. The response to the anti labor reform policies cannot be effected because the trade unions are a divided house. Some scholars argue that working class movement should not be opposing privatization and their focus should be protecting the interest of the workers. Ashutosh Vashne is of the view that it would be easier to launch bigger privatization programs if it is decoupled from large scale retrenchment. The next topic is middle classes. On the job front, the complete story is not so dismal because globalization has also unfolding big opportunities for lots of people, particularly of the upper middle class. This is especially true about people having degrees from the famous IITs and IIMs, who are in big demand both in India and the world over. The students from such premier institutions walk away with unheard of pay packets. India churns out more than 70,000 computers professionals every year in addition to the graduates from the IITs. The Indian software industry employed near 160,000 professionals in 1998-99. Indian software industry has earned a worldwide reputation. This feat has been achieved by leveraging India's highly skilled technical manpower. India has emerged as a powerful player in the world in the IT sector. India's advance in the IT sector has attracted many American and European companies to locate their back office operations in Bangalore, Chennai, Pune, and Gurgaon, etc. The shifting of back office operations of foreign companies has been influenced by many factors like abundant supply of cheap labor, cheap satellite communication, and the felicity of internet. While this development has created tremendous job opportunities in India, it has been used by foreign companies as a cost cutting arrangement. These back office operations range from billing to payroll handling, airline reservation to answering customer complaints. In case of both these kinds of jobs, whether in the much famed IT sector or the call centers, students coming from upper middle class and urban background are more likely to get these jobs. The reservation policy of the government has been in keeping with the idea of social justice. This was found that without reservation, people from the disadvantaged section were unable to get jobs. As of now, the private companies and the multinational corporations do not follow any principle of reservation. Some representatives of disadvantaged sections look at liberalization as a ploy to deny the disadvantaged strata of society the benefits of reservation. Many Dalit leaders like Ram Vilas Paswan and Social Justice Minister in the UPA government led by Manmohan Singh, Meera Kumar, has appealed for reservation even in the private sector. Some people argue that apart from demanding reservation also in private sector, the movement of disadvantaged section should be exert pressure on the government to improve the quality of education in government managed institutions. The people from the disadvantaged section do not have the means to afford quality education offered at high prices in elite schools meant for the well off sections of society. Thus, the introduction of the new economic policy has marginalized a large section of the population. as they do not have the necessary skills to benefit from the opportunities offered by globalization. To make the marginalized partners in the bounty offered by globalization process, there is need of a big investment in imparting that kind of skills in them that they do not lag behind aspirants from privileged section of society. Dress and Sen are of the view that there is great opportunity here for channeling political activism in the direction of forcefully demanding expansion of basic education, health care, and social security for those who are left out of the system. The next is women. Globalization can be seen as the ideology committed to production of for profit, which leads to relative or absolute deprivation of women, colonies, and marginal groups and communities. The exigencies of competition and market are used to enforce policies which aims at profit making at the expense of people and planet. Angela Mellis is of the view that feminists all over the world have come to reject the profit based market system, which compels private ownership of all the earth's goods and recognizes only those things as valuable which can be bought and sold for profit on the market. This market does not value the work of nature and woman. Feminists in developed countries are fighting for recognition of the value of goods and services produced by them in homes. They are also fighting for men's equal participation in such works. They also demand recognition of the value of the social support provided by women in the form of child care, health, and educational services. They are also struggling both in North and South to maintain traditional pattern and capacities of subsistence in the face of devastating development process. The phenomena of globalization, its commitment to commercialization, modernization, export oriented development, growing reliance on private sector, and the obsession with profit motive has adversely affected the cause of women in India also. There has been a sharp fall in women's employment in the organized sector in the era of globalization. The expansion of informal sector has put women in the category of reserved army. They have joined the rank of poor. This increasing feminization of poverty is a matter of grave concern. Even in today's India's patriarchal norms established nearly 2000 years ago continue to prevail. The media and the education system continue to project the ideals of motherhood and the loyal and faithful wife. The subordinate position of women in society is reinforced by a look at declining sex ratio of girls, growing domestic violence of all kinds against women, the spurt in dowry deaths, and rising rape cases. Derez and Sand holds that the persistence of sharp gender inequalities in many different forms is one of the most striking aspects of the Indian economy, and it yields disparities in power, decision making, and well being. They are of the view that subordination of women in Indian society tends to impair their effectiveness in reducing deprivation in general. Women's emancipation in the form of basic education and economic independence can have many positive impacts. Kerala is the shining example in this regard. Their women's emancipation has a direct impact on childcare and a noticeable check on fertility rate. The suppression of women from participation in social, political, and economic life hurts the society as a whole, not just women. Women have often been active in demanding and working for basic social change. Social movements in general and women's movement in particular should exert enough pressure on government so that proper policies for women's emancipation should be made and also implemented. Now, the next point is networking and cooperation. Most of the social movements are generally preoccupied with their own particular struggle. They are gripped with the mindset of our movement and their movement. This exclusiveness makes them vulnerable in the event of oppression unleashed by state. With networking and coordination among them, these social movements can play important role in achieving democratic social transformation. The need of networking and coordination is not limited to social movements within a country. Environment movement and anti-WTO movement have demonstrated global networking and coordination. Aaron Pollack is of the view that the social movements are increasingly going global in their response to the neoliberal economies. The programs and policies have impact on lives of people are not exclusively in the hands of national governments. Many times programs and policies are direct consequence of the decision taken by global actors. This necessitates networking and coordination among social movements on global level to bargain for a better deal. The communication revolution that has accompanied globalization has created a situation in which any form of movement in any part of the globe can easily attract the attention of global community. This can very well create public opinion in favor or against some issue. Roderick, in his book Has Globalization Gone Too Far, argues that economic globalization catalyzes social protest in three ways. First, unskilled workers in the developed countries perceive a decline in their bargaining power as a result of greater capital mobility and feared increase in the elasticity of demand for domestic labor. Workers fear that capital has a decreased incentive to maintain the post-World War. It bargained in which capital provided workers with a stable living wage in exchange for the promise of labor peace. Accordingly, unskilled workers protest globalization as they now face increased uncertainty about wage cuts, instability in labor markets, and lower benefits. Second, opposition can arise as globalization eclipses domestic norms. Most countries uphold distinct norms about labor market standards and, similar market practices. When world markets are highly protected, these normative differences are juxtaposed but rarely comes into conflict with one another. With greater international economic integration, however, these normative differences clash directly and place in sharp relief distinct and conflicting beliefs about state responsibility vis-à-vis citizens, where greater economic integration takes place at the expense of the national legal norms. Globalization process can and do endanger political opposition. It also triggered off anti-child labor movements. Third, opposition arises as workers blame globalization for dismantling the welfare state. International institutions pressures to whittle away the social programs and arrangements but that protected a certain categories of workers in the past from unstable, unpredictable, and more open markets. In India, because of globalization, industrial growth has increased, which provide employment in informal sector. Hence, workers get fragmented and compete among each other for security and job. It adversely affects organized struggles. What we have is localized working class movements. Because of the increased international network of activists for human rights, transnational collective action has increased. International pressure against communal violence and support of Narmada Bachao Andolan are some of the more important examples. Now, summary of the unit. To some, it can be said that the rolling back globalization does not seem to be a plausible option because an overwhelming consensus exists today in its favor, both among political parties and intellectuals. Globalization seems to be perpetuating old inequalities and also creating new kind of inequalities. That is why there is a need for what has been called shaping globalization. The wealth and opportunities which are created should be benefited every section of the society. The state policies should aim at imparting education and other technical skills to the disadvantaged sections like Dalits and women. This can help these to develop a sense of partnership in progress. There is a greater need of powerful social movements in present context, more particularly because state appears to be on retreat. There is also a need of coordination and networking among social movements both on national and global levels to ensure sustainable and equitable development. It is also necessary to ensure that development does not take place at the cost of rights and freedoms of the people. Here we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.